This is a guest essay written by IDF Lieutenant Colonel Nadav Shoshani, the IDF's international spokesperson.
The Kamal Adwan Hospital in Gaza has been at the center of the world's attention in recent weeks. It's easy to understand why. It's not every day that 240 Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad terrorist operatives are found hiding inside a hospital. However, this may not have been the part of the story that you saw shared in the media. So, in this edition of Mission Brief, I'll be doing a deep dive into how Hamas has turned hospitals in Gaza into a combat zone and giving you the latest details of what exactly went on inside Kamal Adwan. Let me start by making a few points very clear. Hospitals should be a safe haven for the sick and injured to receive medical treatment. Hospitals should never be weaponized in war. And the only fighting inside a hospital should be a doctor battling to save the life of a sick patient. So why have hospitals in Gaza become a flashpoint in the war between Israel and Hamas? And who is responsible for this? Since Hamas began this war against Israel on October 7th, 2023, it has systematically and repeatedly turned hospitals across the Gaza Strip into hubs of terror used to wage war on the IDF and the people of Israel. For the terrorist organizations in Gaza, the takeover and militarization of Gaza's hospitals is not merely a temporary tactic, but a core part of their strategy and modus operandi. To understand why, we have to understand the way that Hamas thinks on a fundamental level. For decent people all around the world, the value of human life, the protection of the sick, and the safeguarding of children are the pillars of our shared humanity. It goes without saying that we want to shield the most vulnerable people in society from any possible harm. Not so Hamas. Hamas sees the world and its system of values very, very differently. In the weakest and most vulnerable, Hamas sees an opportunity to take advantage of them for its own benefit. Why? Because everything can be sacrificed to serve the jihadist goal of destroying the state of Israel. With this mindset, the importance of protecting the lives of children, the elderly, and the sick is irrelevant. Now assassinated Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar himself said that thousands of civilian casualties are necessary sacrifices for Hamas. What's more, Hamas knows it is facing the IDF, a military of a democratic state that abides by international law and a clear code of ethics, that will go to great lengths and take every feasible action to mitigate harm to civilians in war. So, while the IDF takes extensive measures to protect civilians, Hamas uses this to its own advantage by embedding its military apparatus behind the most vulnerable people, believing that that's where they'll be safest. But don't just take my word for it. This is Anas Mohammed Faiz al-Sharif. He was a cleaner in the Kamal Adwan Hospital and Hamas military operative. He said in an interrogation, quote, "They believe the hospital is a safe haven for them because the military cannot directly target it." As Faiz al-Sharif said, there's another practical benefit for Hamas in its hospital warfare strategy. Hamas knows that the best place to hide is where there is most likely to be electricity, fuel, food, and water. That's why Hamas operatives hide inside UN humanitarian shelters, fire rockets from school compounds, and operate again and again inside Gaza's hospitals. Kamal Adwan Hospital in northern Gaza is a prime example of Hamas's cynical strategy. Back in December of 2023, we found evidence that pointed to Hamas using the Kamal Adwan Hospital to hide terror operatives and weapons. The then director of the hospital was Ahmad Kahalot, a senior Hamas military operative. During that operation, the IDF operated to apprehend terror suspects hiding inside the hospital and clear the premises of dangerous weapons. But this wasn't the end of Hamas's operations inside Kamal Adwan. Hamas returned to Kamal Adwan again and again, thinking it would be a safe hideout. This is why in recent weeks, the IDF conducted another precise, targeted operation against terrorist operatives and infrastructure in the Kamal Adwan Hospital and the vicinity. This operation was conducted based on substantial intelligence, confirming the resumption of military activities by Hamas in and around the hospital. Yes, Hamas deliberately rigged the areas all around the Kamal Adwan hospital with explosives, an indication that the lives of civilians most urgently needing medical care were a very low priority for Hamas. Despite repeated calls by Israel to cease the unlawful military use of the hospital since the start of the operation in October, these warnings were ignored. We are aware of the implications of operating in such areas, and so we adhere strictly to international law. In the month prior to the operation, significant quantities of fuel, food, and medical supplies were facilitated to the hospital. Moreover, before the operation began, we allowed and facilitated the evacuation of over 350 patients and staff to other medical facilities in the Gaza Strip via ambulances along secure routes. As the operation progressed, the IDF also enabled and facilitated the transfer of 95 additional patients and staff to the Indonesian hospital in Gaza, ensuring the delivery of more critical resources, including 5,000 liters of fuel and medical equipment, to sustain its operations in coordination with the hospital's medical staff. The operations inside the hospital were conducted by IDF Special Forces, operating under strict rules of engagement to minimize harm to patients and civilians who had not been evacuated. The IDF took these humanitarian considerations while coming under heavy fire. During the operation, terrorists in the area of the hospital fired anti-tank missiles and RPGs at the troops. At the conclusion of the 36-hour operation, over 240 Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad terrorist operatives, or those otherwise suspected of terror activities, were apprehended, some of whom attempted to pose as patients or flee using ambulances. Among the suspects taken for questioning were Hamas military engineering and anti-tank missile operatives, and approximately 15 terrorists who infiltrated into Israel during the October 7th massacre. Additionally, the troops apprehended the current director of Kamal Adwan Hospital, Hussam Abu Sufaya, who is suspected of being a Hamas terrorist operative and holding a rank within the Hamas organization. Under his management, hundreds of terrorists were allegedly hiding in the hospital. The bottom line is that Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad have been exploiting Kamal Adwan for their own benefit, turning a place built to heal the wounded into a place focused on terror and war. In stark contrast, we have shown time and time again how the IDF is committed to protecting its civilians and adhering to international law. As I've said many times, but will repeat here, our war is with Hamas, not the people in Gaza, especially not the sick and wounded.